Welcome back to the Autoblog Podcast. I'm Greg Migliore. We have a great show for you this week. A couple of cars here were revealed last week, much anticipated. The Cadillac Celestiq, John saw it like 2 years ago. He saw it so long ago, there was not even a pandemic. It was a different time, a different world. We're also going to talk about the Honda Civic Type R. And of course, the Z06, we're going to work into it as well. With that, I'll bring in John Snyder, senior editor for All Things Green. What's going on, man?
Oh, just enjoying, the hottest part of summer as best I can. The move is to go up north where it's cooler and be by the lake. That's the trick. Because in Ann Arbor, it's also art fair, always the hottest month of the year, always a lot of storms. So come up here and I'm nice and cool and I'm grooving.
There you go. I used to work in Ann Arbor. The art fair was always a tough time to be there if you weren't going to the art fair. Let me put it that way. I've been to it. I've had a drink. I've looked at some of the art. It's a great time if you want to be there. If you're just trying to work or like you have to park, it's a tough place to be. It's hot. It's like Ann Arbor is just taken over. It can be very tricky if you're just trying to, like I was doing, write for a real estate magazine that no longer exists. So. But that was a long time ago.
Yeah. I think it's actually over now. I managed to avoid it completely, which, some years we like to go to it, but it's been a long time since we've gone. We had a shop downtown, so we would be there for every art fair when we owned our store down there. So that was always, I got my fill of art fair, I think, for maybe another decade.
Yeah, it's definitely for me like once every few years kind of thing, but so it goes. All right, so that's the art fair. That's the news section, and our review section is pretty good. We've got the brand new Range Rover. I just got out of that this morning, in fact. Price tag, First Edition. It has that sort of copper bronze paint, $164,000. Seems kind of outrageous for a Range Rover, but it's a beautiful SUV. And then you drove something that's perhaps a little more important for the industry, but still probably not quite as saucy as this Range Rover. That was the Genesis GV60, but it's a very good looking electric vehicle too. So
yeah, I was quite shocked by it. We'll get into that.
We will. Finally, we will spend your money. We have a new question, and we also have an update from Blake, who we've been sort of tackling the evolving 911 situation that he's working through. So a small update there. But with that, let's get into it. You saw the Celestiq March or February of 2020. They showed it to you in Warren, where turns out they're going to build it. We finally get the full pictures of this thing. It's gorgeous. The headlines have been borderline drooling from some of the other outlets in town. What's your big takeaway now that it's out there and you can share it to the world?
Well, at least now I can actually, show people what I've been trying to explain for years through words because we couldn't bring cameras in or anything then. But yeah, it is a flagship vehicle for Cadillac. This represents a big step forward for them as a brand in terms of design and in terms of, the future of powertrains. Funny enough, they designed the Celestiq even before they designed the Lyriq. So this was sort of the first step in terms of design, even though the Lyriq has come to us first. But yeah, this is going to be riding on the Ultium platform. We haven't been given specs, but I imagine they're going to be pretty outrageous. This is going to be the car that they're selling to celebrities and, MVP basketball players and things like that. It's going to be a statement for when people do. It's going to be hand built at Warren. They haven't built cars there since the 50s or 60s. They're gonna hand build it there. Tons of customization. But as you can see in the pictures now, this thing is big and long. Very, very spacious. Huge use of lighting, just like they did with the Lyriq. It's got that sort of light up grille that smiles at you when you approach. The lighting on the inside, there's a lot going on there. A lot of really interesting materials. There's a pillar to pillar display up front with privacy function for the passenger, so the passenger can watch video content without distracting the driver. And then there's, screens on the back of the front headrests. There's little touch screens between both front and rear seats to control different functions. I imagine there's going to be a lot of different functions that it can control. It's going to use the next generation of GM's hands-free driving, which they're calling Ultra Cruise. Not totally sure what that's going to entail yet, but this is a big step forward for the brand as they move toward becoming all electric and sort of redefine themselves in this new era of EVs. And yeah, what a statement.
It's interesting. Now, just to let the listeners, the readers know, a lot of times we will go to events and there'll be like sort of a main crux or mission, like, hey, we're going to tell you guys this. This is like the press conference, like you see on CNN or ESPN. There's that part of it. And then sometimes if you're doing something cool, they'll just be like, hey, you can't write about this. You can't even say you saw it, but we're going to show this to you. And they sort of know stuff's always going to leak. That's just the way the world works. I was surprised this never did. And then they'll just pull the cover off. And that's how John saw this. I actually saw the Ford Bronco. Man, when did I see that? 2019, something like that. And I think now that it's on sale, I can finally say it. I saw it, back then under similar circumstances. But is anything different? Did you see what did you see? Did you see like foam and plastic? Did you see something that was real? How much has changed?
This is what I saw.
Awesome.
As far as I can remember, it's been over 2 years, and I, didn't have any visual reference to go by in that time. But it's just like I remember it. And I think the production version is going to look pretty much just like this. There might be a couple tweaks. This one looks like it has camera mirrors. If they don't get that approved in time for production, this will probably have real mirrors on the sides, little things like that. But for the most part, this looks realistic, and this looks like I imagine this is what the production vehicle is going to look like. They really haven't changed much, and it was an interesting event. It was, like you said, it was one of those things where you get to see cars before they're shown to anyone else, and we were free to discuss it. We were free to talk about everything we knew and to describe what we saw. But also, this was during when they were still teasing the Hummer EV, so I got to see that, and I gotten to see the EV, the Hummer SUV, and I got to see what looked like an electric Escalade, and then also it was before they showed the Bolt EUV, and I got to see that in prototype form, as well as some sort of design bucks of what is now the electric Equinox. And there was a Buick of the same size, and there was also a Bolt size Buick they showed us too. So there's more stuff coming. And one thing they didn't have there was the Silverado EV or the Blazer EV. Those weren't even on our radar yet, really. Well, that we'd heard about the Silverado EV, but they didn't have any sort of example, whether it was a show car or design buck on hand there. But this and the Lyric were looking totally ready to go, and the Lyric stayed true to that form, impressively so. The design of the Lyric was really impressive, especially on the inside. And so I imagine, this is, they're taking that same design language. I imagine they're not going to change this very much. And there's some really neat tech in it, like the smart glass roof. I didn't really get a chance to see how that all works with the suspended particle device technology that, different passengers can have different levels of shade in the glass roof above them, which is kind of neat. And, some things like that. There's still, a lot left to see. We don't know exactly what the powertrain is going to be. It's, Ultium, but they haven't told us which motors or how powerful or battery capacity and range and things like that. So there's still a lot to learn about this vehicle, but yeah, finally get our first glimpses, and it is really neat looking. I love that roof line that just stretches way back and tapers at the very end of the car. You know, almost like a elongated fastback, and yeah, there's tons of room for passengers. It's going to be one of those cars that's going to be, you're going to have to debate whether you want to drive it or be driven in it if you're one of the customers. And prices are going to be astounding too. You know, 200,000 could go over 300,000 easy with options. And like I said, tons of room for customization because they're going to be hand building these things. So yeah, real flagship, real halo car for Cadillac.
In your article, and also just in general, Cadillac called out sort of two historical touchstones. One was the 1957 Cadillac Broam, which you have to dive deep into history to sort of remember what that was, because frankly, at that time, a lot of things had fins and were called Broams. It could get a little diluted, but this was another very limited edition car. I think they made only 400 as I read the GM Heritage site here. Again, a hand-built, expensive car, beautiful. If you actually look at the pictures, it was actually a little bit more austere, if that makes sense, than like what was to come with the 59 just a couple years later. I think everybody knows that car, whether it's like the Ghostbusters car or you've just seen those big fins. And then they also called back to the V16 era before World War II. And that's where you looked at Cadillac, where they were like really pioneering the use of powerful, like one of the original applications of horsepower and engine technology as a luxury. It wasn't necessarily like a muscle application, but it was like, you know, back in the formative years of the internal combustion engine, where like if you had a more powerful engine, that meant you could literally go faster down your unpaved road in the middle of nowhere than the guy in the Buick or the Ford, because the engine was so much more powerful. So I think the idea there is to, I mean, one, they're both great stories. Whenever you're an old brand and you want to like sort of make something seem even better than it is, you go back in your history and you're like, yeah, this page looks good. Flip a few more pages. This one works. Okay, yeah, that's part of the story. Is it true or not? Sure. It's a good story. I mean, they're Cadillac. I believe them. Sure, why not? You have a history like them. Go for it. All more power to you. But I mean, I would also say this, I buy it. I mean, it's legit to like look at these two cars as like inspiration for this really tour de force, if you will, of design and technology.
Right. Like you look at the Cadillac 16, if you get a chance, go look at some photos of that. And you can sort of start to see the resemblances, at least in terms of proportions. I mean, they're very different looking cars because, you know, completely different eras, and they didn't want to make this look like a blast from the past. It's definitely inspired by these vehicles. It's not, you know, trying to copy them, but you definitely get sort of that feeling. And some of the feelings of some of the Cadillac concept cars that have come out between then and now that you know, still sort of carry over that gravity and panache and overwhelming presence, sometimes in just sheer size of these things.
Do you think this changes Cadillac's trajectory in any way? Because it's, you know, we're talking about a very low volume car. It's like a hatchback, which is a very like lowbrow way of calling this gorgeous, you know, design element, but it is a hatchback, or you could maybe call it a four-door sort of shooting brake kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's what it is. My guess is if they sell enough of them and they create enough buzz with this car, the rest of the Cadillac, it's the ultimate halo car. Just everything else looks better. I mean, what do you think? You know, 10 years into the future, where do you think we stand with this for Cadillac?
You know, it's hard to say because this is more a sedan. It's definitely not an SUV or crossover by any means. So I'm hoping that means that they're willing to branch out and, you know, engage with those segments, continue to engage with those segments. They're one of the car companies that still do. But I imagine Cadillac has such a rich history that they'll continue to find inspiration where they can, and there's tons of source material for that. But I think this will sort of set the tone for the design, interior and exterior, and I think we're going to see some more differentiation between Cadillac and the rest of the GM brands. I think this is going to sort of help them stand out from those. Like the Lyric, they used all new pieces, all new switch gear, all new, everything was, the tooling costs must have been enormous. And they said they're not going to share those pieces with the other brands. So you're not going to be finding parts bin pieces in these Cadillacs. And I think it's going to help them stand out from the crowd and sort of, plant their flag in the sand and say, this is who we are going forward. We are the premier thing. There's going to be some competition in GM again. Hopefully, I don't see how there couldn't be, trying to outdo this. But that was a great thing for GM in the early 60s, and just look at the cars that came from the different brands competing with one another. It was a lot of fun, really cool powertrains. Again, there's going to be some sharing of technology, some of the underpinnings, but I think in terms of design, they're going to sort of try and distance themselves from the rest of the brand, rest of the automaker.
I think, internal competition among the brands at General Motors could be a really good thing, because that's when, GM was at its, absolute, heyday in the late 50s, early 60s. The brands were competing internally with each other. And, you saw how good it made each brand. It also made them, much more separate. You didn't see the badge engineering, which we then got to 20 years after that. So, we'll see. It's right now, I'm pretty optimistic about it. It's very interesting to me that this is the approach they're taking too. A hand-built, like, sedan, low volume, this expensive. Very honestly, I didn't see this coming from Cadillac. I think it's definitely a moonshot, which I think is a great thing too. It's not like, hey, we're going to rethink our sports sedan strategy and try to steal a 10th of a market share from, the Germans, or we're going to roll out yet another crossover. They're like, okay, yeah, all that stuff is going to happen in some way or in some form. But you know what? That's happening then. Right now, our next move is just to go huge. And, is a business economic strategy move. I think it's interesting. From a product perspective, it's interesting. I think it's all the more interesting because it's Cadillac. If Genesis does this, or even Lexus, we're all like, okay, yeah, cool. Some people will buy them, sure. With Cadillac, it's a lot like, I would almost use the analogy of in sports, like the New York Yankees, or, you're wearing a Michigan hat, like Michigan football, they always think they're supposed to be good at some point, even if they're not at that moment. And when you look at a brand like Cadillac, that's 120 years old, they don't expect to suck, they expect to have something that, will be world beating. Even today, they still say the standard of the world. It takes guts to say that in 2022 when you're taking on Mercedes. So, to me, this is a very gutsy play on their part.
Yeah. And talking to the folks at Cadillac, they are super enthusiastic about this new trajectory. You go to some of these events and they're like, yeah, this is our new thing. It's an evolution of this or whatever. These folks are fired up to make cool cars and to sort of remake a name for themselves. It's good to see that sort of enthusiasm. And yeah, it's going to be interesting going forward. I'm interested to see sort of what segments stick around and what ones get invested in the most. But gosh, I like to see, a big coach like this, a big giant sedan thing, sort of paving the way.
No, I agree. I think this is, yeah, the Cadillac is looking to have a pretty strong, 2020s right now. I mean, I think they've showed us what their products are going to be. The ones that we've, are currently, on the road have been pretty strong. We'll just, all that's left for them really is like sales and, that type of thing. Is will the sales volume end up coming to the point where it's like, oh wow, they are number one in the world? Do they want to be? I think for them, being the most profitable luxury brand is probably what they would be going for versus, hey, we sell more cars than anybody else. So yeah, I mean, I think this is another one I can't wait to drive. I mean,
Yeah.
it's, I don't know if we'll ever drive it. We probably will, but I mean,
Yeah, I really hope so. It's gonna be one of those cars that you're not gonna see a lot of, and when you see them, they're all gonna be sort of unique, and it's gonna be a special thing to see. It's gonna be a really fun one for all you car spotters out there to see out in the wild. I think if they can get customers and car fans as excited about this car as Cadillac is, it's gonna be a wonderful thing.
All right. Sounds good. Well, that is the Cadillac Celestiq. Really, really interesting. Check out John's story if you haven't. It's obviously up on the site. Plenty of pictures. We have some videos too. But let's transition over to a couple other kind of quicker news hits. Honda Civic Type R. This is really, they're billing this as the most powerful production Honda ever in the United States. They didn't tell us the horsepower, but we can make some assumptions on that one going by previous Hondas. In case you're wondering, the NSX was an Acura, so don't comment. We know in the United States. So it looks pretty good. I think it does walk the line a little bit as far as cartoonish, maybe not as much as some of the more recent Type Rs. In that sense, it's a little chiller, I'd say, especially with that wing and back. Interior looks pretty wild to me. I like that. And this is also the 30th anniversary of the R moniker. So, some nice touchstones there, if you will. Yeah, I mean, here's the number I was looking for. Last gen CTR was 306 horsepower. So it's going to obviously eclipse that. 306, I said. And then 316 is what it made in Europe. So, I mean, it's going to be a pretty powerful car. I don't think there's any doubt there. This is sort of like as we're meandering through the final stages of, internal combustion engines. Plenty of these cars are still in the pipeline. They've been in development for a few years. They're going to start landing. This looks pretty raw. I'd like to drive this.
I appreciate that they sort of dialed back the styling a little bit compared to the last generation. That one, it almost looked as though the designers were paid by the line. There was just a lot going on. And I'm sure when you get up close to this, there's going to be lots of little details, but it just doesn't look quite so busy and cluttered design-wise, while still looking quite athletic inside and out. I do like seeing once again that honeycomb mesh grille vent on the inside across the dash. That looks pretty cool. I think it still looks good in this sporty, application. But I think the last Type R handled its power super well. It was really good to drive, really well balanced. I drove it on a track and was really impressed with how neutral it could be. And I imagine that with an incremental or even more substantial power boost, with the things Honda's been learning in recent years, just in making cars, that they're not going to make a car that's too powerful for what it can handle. And I anticipate that this will still be a great handling car as well.
I've really been more of a sort of a Civic Si guy, if you will. I've always thought the Type R was a lot, not quite my flavor of whiskey, if you will. Certainly appreciate what it can do on a track, but it's intense. And like I said earlier, and to agree with you, the looks are a bit more palatable I think just in general, I think it's better looking for this generation. The last one was kind of like almost like that sea monster vibe. Like it was a bit much, even if you were a diehard fan. So yeah, I mean, I think it's good that Honda continues to invest in this segment too.
Yeah,
they're continuing with the Type R.
And I'm glad we get, another generation of vehicles with that fabulous 6-speed manual.
Yes, that's actually really one of the better points right here is that 6-speed. It's brilliant.
It is. And, with internal combustion, eventually going away, this is going to be one of your last cracks at it. I imagine it hasn't got this awesome 6-speed manual hasn't gotten worse over this generation. So I imagine this is going to be a great last hurrah for that transmission. And gosh, yeah, just the way that little stick feels. It's so snickety and just really nice to row through the gears with.
Yeah, it's I've always thought Honda, Mazda, and often Volkswagen, their transmissions when used in their performance cars on like sort of mainstream chassis, it's always been just a really good recipe, for making those platforms as fun to drive as they can be. So
yeah.
Well, speaking of performance, Z06. I just saw one, I think for the first time in the flesh on Saturday. I went to a Cars and Coffee with my son, and it's the one up on Pastiner's. I think it's called Parking at Pastiner's, but it's a Cars and Coffee. And we're walking through the neighborhood in Royal Oak, or maybe that's Birmingham. It's like right off the Woodward corridor. And we're both like, whoa, what is that? And he's just looking at it because it's awesome looking. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's got to be the Z06. And it was. And it's really impressive. It's one of those that I think looks better. It looks better than the last gen Z06, which now it's the mid-engine layout, of course. But also, they toned down some of the things. I thought some of the last like front engine Corvettes did get a little cartoonish with all the wings and fins and things, splitters. This one it does look like a jet, let me put it that way, but it's just a little bit more subdued. It was white. Yeah, I don't know if whoever drove that, if you're listening, your car looked awesome last weekend. Point of this is not my Saturday activities. The point is General Motors is offering Z06 buyers some sort of incentive. We don't know exactly how much, but incentives sort of in the form of points and things like that, not to sell their car immediately. And they're hoping this will, like in general, prevent flipping of the Z06, which we've seen for a number of hot releases in recent years. People buy the car and then boom, resell it real quick.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure how the points program works there, but we'll see if it's going to be enough to keep people from flipping the car, because gosh, you could probably make a lot by doing that. Hopefully, I think a lot of people who will buy this car are people who will want to hold on to it. They're going to be genuine enthusiasts, and maybe collectors, or just people who really like the Corvette and want to drive the coolest one. So hopefully we don't see a lot of people flipping cars. And it's interesting that an automaker has to do something like this to try and keep people from flipping the car. But I guess it's better than having to sign some agreement as a buyer that you won't sell it, or else you'll face some sort of punishment. I think a reward is better than punishment here.
Yeah, I think the other thing is, I think if you're going to flip the car, you're going to do it. You're going to figure it out. And if you're not, you're not. The incentives, the points, some of the the subtext that they've put in here, it's not going to make a difference. Like, you want the Z06, you're going to be happy to get like the points or the some of the parts, things like that. Or, you're going to say, whatever, that's just the tax I pay to flip the car, and you're going to throw it up wherever you want to throw it up, and somebody will pay you, extra, whatever premium you could get. And that's that's just part of the cost of doing business. That's capitalism. So, we'll
That's
see.
Yeah, especially in times of product shortages.
Mhm.
It's a tough situation out there. I do really hope that the people who honestly want to buy and keep this car get the chance to do that.
Agreed. So that is the news segment. Let's run into some reviews. So a couple of pretty hot ones here. You can flip a coin, who goes first here. Why don't you jump in with the GV60? This is an important vehicle. It's electric. I think that actually is lost on some people too, because it doesn't really indicate in any way that it's electric. I just assumed it was like, one of the other GV Genesis crossovers. But why don't you kind of give everybody the backstory because I feel like a lot of people aren't really read in on what exactly the GV60 is.
Sure. It's Genesis' first all-electric vehicle. And yeah, the naming scheme is kind of weird because this one doesn't have the electrified appendage at the end as the newer ones that are coming out, like the G80. That one's called the G80 electrified, but it's all electric. This one's just called the GV60 and doesn't have the electrified moniker, but it is indeed all electric. We get two versions here in the US. First of all, it's based on the same EGMP platform as the Hyundai Ioniq 5 and Kia EV6. So it's sort of rounding out that trio of electric crossovers. This one has the same wheelbase as the EV6, which is slightly shorter than the Ioniq 5, but it's shorter in length than both of them. And it's kind of funny. You look at it in pictures, it looks kind of big and tall, and you stand next to it in person, and it's actually seems quite small. And you do lose a little bit of legroom compared to those other vehicles. But this one, the one I was driving was the Performance. So there's two versions we get here, the Advanced and the Performance. They're both all-wheel drive. The Advanced starts at just under 60,000, and that has a 160 kilowatt rear motor and a 74 kilowatt front motor. So that one is a total of 314 horsepower, 446 pound-feet of torque. The Performance gets both motors are the 160 kilowatt. So that is what does that come out to? A total of 429 horsepower and 516 pound-feet of torque. But there's also a button on the steering wheel for a boost mode, and it's similar to the Porsche sort of overclock button that it's almost like a push to pass button. In Porsche, I think it lasts for 20 seconds. Here, it ups power to 483 horsepower and 516 pound-feet for 10 seconds at a time. And then it goes back to whatever mode you had it in before. But you can immediately press it again. There's no real cooldown afterwards. I hadn't done it over and over and over and over and over again to see if power falls off a cliff. But this thing is silly fast. It's really, really quick. I think Genesis claims a 4-second 0 to 60 time, and that's about what I would guess. Probably, 4 seconds, probably tops. Once you're going, you're just gone. By the time you think to check the speed, you're past 60 miles an hour. Also, interestingly enough, there's a drift mode. You have to put it's almost like a cheat code for a video game. You have to put the car into park and then hold the stability control button down for, I think it's 3 seconds until it turns completely off. Then you hold down both of the paddles simultaneously. You have to time it just right. You have to pull them back both simultaneously, hold those for 3 seconds, and you'll get a little notification that says drift mode activated. And that allows you to sort of slide the car around a little bit. I had it out in not a huge parking lot, so I didn't do a lot of that, but I had the vehicle off to Zach. Hopefully he's getting to test it out a little bit. Also, we don't want to, completely destroy the tires on the thing. But if you're a GV60 owner and you have budget for tires, and you have a safe place to do it, go nuts with the drift mode. This thing, it gives up grip pretty easily. Two things I knock it for. It doesn't have a lot of grip, both, fore and aft and lateral. Whenever if you're in sport mode or boost mode, the tires will chirp as you take off, and then they'll spin some more a moment later. And if you have any steering dialed in, it spins like crazy. And but I guess that sort of helps make drift mode possible. The other thing is the handling is a little on the gooey side. It's kind of like when I drove the Mustang Mach-E and the Volkswagen ID4 back to back, I was really surprised. The Mach-E was much quicker in a straight line, but the steering on the ID4 was way more precise, way more pointy, way quicker turn in. This GV60 goes more toward the side of the Mach-E. If you turn the wheel sharply, it takes a moment for it to turn its nose. It feels a little bit like a boat that hasn't planed yet. But that said, it's really fast in a straight line, and also super quiet, super comfortable. The suspension, even in sport mode, you get very little in the way of noise or vibration, or just bumping around in the cabin at all. And it's so quiet that Genesis put in its active sound design, piping in sort of a soundtrack. And there's three different sound options. One's futuristic, sort of that spaceship sound when you accelerate. There's a G motor one that sounds kind of like a gas engine with sort of a sport exhaust, but much quieter. And then there's an electric version, an electric motor version, and which says something about how quiet the car is, because you can't really hear the electric motors when you have active sound design off. So if you want it to actually sound like an EV, and get that sort of aural feedback from the powertrain, you have to put it in this sound mode to actually hear an artificial electric motor whine, which is kind of interesting to me. But I mostly just kept the sound off for most of my driving. I made a video where you can sort of hear the different modes, but I mostly kept it off. I like the quiet sound and the feeling of whisking away in silence, other than the sound of the tires squealing. But yeah, very cool car. I liked it quite a bit. I think it looks great. On the inside, very nice materials. That's one of the ways, the performance is more than is offered in the Ioniq 5 or the EV6, and just the level of luxury and comfort that's afforded here is another way that this car differentiates itself from its EGMP cousins. But yeah, it was a really nice car to drive. I think it's hard to tell whether it will be successful in terms of sales. I think it was successful in terms of execution, but there's still not a lot of Genesis brand recognition. You're starting to see more of them, of different Genesis vehicles out there, and this one is a popular segment, the small crossover, and it's got the performance chops and the luxury chops to keep those customers happy. So I think there's a chance this could be pretty successful on the sales side, but it's hard to tell. I hope it is, because it's a good car. I'd like to see people with smiles on their faces driving a super fast EV down the road.
Certainly looks beautiful. It's obviously something Genesis sort of sorely needed, which is a very premium, versatile SUV crossover, if you will. Though I guess the one hangup I have is I really enjoyed driving the EV6 the last time I drove one about probably 6 weeks ago. Also enjoyed the Ioniq. I think that's a brilliant car. I don't know if it were my money, I probably wouldn't step up. I would probably just pick one of the other two and go with that. Just as far as like maybe, you're foregoing some of those like really flashy elements, but like, you're still getting a very capable, very attractive EV. So I would probably land on the EV6 if I were spending my money of these three. Let me put it that way.
But Greg, then you don't get drift mode.
I mean,
which you're gonna want the drift mode. You're gonna need it, in fact. No, but I'm totally
very fair, very fair. I may want drift mode. You're right.
I'm totally with you, though. I think the all-wheel drive versions of the EV6 and Ioniq 5 are plenty fast. They're about 5 seconds, a little under 5 seconds, 0 to 60. Plenty fast. And they handle a little better. They do things a little differently from one another. I personally like the Ioniq 5 better. I like the lounge-like interior as opposed to the sort of sporty interior of the EV6. But, that's just my cup of tea. But yeah, either way, I would probably pick one of those over this. Although, when you get into the more powerful, higher trims of those cars, you're starting to butt up against the low end of the Genesis. But I don't know. If it's really nice on the inside. If you really want, if you're a luxury car buyer, that's what you're going to pick. The other ones just don't have the same level of luxury and comfort, although they're very comfortable and they're very nicely designed. They're very interesting to look at. I just think this one takes that part of it to another level, and you get the bragging rights with the extra horsepower, the boost mode, and the drift mode if you get the performance.
And that's very fair. And if I had driven it, perhaps I might have that context, and my opinion might be swayed a little bit. I do think EVs, rightly or wrongly, they get a little bit of a break as far as like, everybody expects to pay for the technology, and those who want it will seek it out and then in fact pay more for it. I think some people are often willing to make some compromises on the insides. Like if you get inside a Polestar, like 2 specifically, very nice car, but nothing special. You're also paying a little bit more for that, as it is a premium brand, for example. So, I mean, I sort of feel like there's some EV buyers who will say, well, this Ioniq 5, this looks great. It gives me this much range, this much power. The inside's a little dull, although most people seem to like it. And they'll just take that as par for the course. Same with the EV6, although in the case of the EV6, I just think it's the best looking of the three, irregardless of price. But you could probably pitch me on the Ioniq 5 as like 1 and 1A. And it's odd because I actually really like Genesis design. I think they've been crushing it. I think just almost by default, it's like a very amazingly good third place here. But I just happen to like the other two a little bit more totally subjectively.
A couple other things that Genesis has that the other vehicles don't have. One is that orb, that crazy orb that flips over and turns into a shifter. It's a total party trick, and that's not something that would cause me to pick the Genesis over the others. Another thing this has, you can input your fingerprint, and there's a little touch button to record your fingerprint. And there's also on the B pillar on the driver's side, outside, you can teach it to recognize your face. So let's say, I don't know, you left your key, you meet up with some friends, and you went rafting or something, and you're throwing all your gear into one of their cars, and then they take off, and you get to your car. I don't have my keys. You can open the car with your face and start it with your fingerprint. I mean, again, not a big deal. But interestingly enough, this doesn't have the highway driving assist 2. So it doesn't have the updated logic for when a car cuts in front of you or a car encroaches on your lane, and your car will sort of adjust accordingly. It doesn't have the machine learning where it learns how you drive and adapts to that. It also doesn't have the augmented reality heads-up display, which I think is probably not really that important to a lot of people. It still has a heads-up display that'll show you, where you need to turn. It just doesn't highlight the car in front of you, and it's not 12 feet projected out in front of you instead of 4 feet projected in front of you. But I kind of thought that was interesting, that they didn't sort of include those technologies that the EV6 and Ioniq 5 have, but it does have the fingerprint and the facial recognition. It also has, I think this might be available on those other vehicles. You can use your phone as a key too, as a digital key, like a proximity key. You don't even have to take it out of your pocket to unlock the door. And then you can actually share that digital key with, I think, 3 other people. So if you want to give other people access to your car, permanently or temporarily, you can share your digital key with them, and they can, if you need someone to come pick up your car at the airport or something, you can give them, a digital copy of your key for their phone, and they can drive it away.
I think that's a very useful feature that I think I'd like to see it in a number of cars. Actually, I don't necessarily know if that has to be like a luxury premium type thing. I think that's just highly useful. I mean, because when you have multiple drivers in a household, it's super easy to like misplace your keys, and your phone, if you lose it, well, you make it your business to find it. So there's that. Cool. So that's the GV60. Wrap up drives here with just a couple of quick thoughts here on the brand new. This is the new Range Rover, the Land Rover Range Rover. I had, I think I told you this offline, so maybe you want to guess how much this one cost, John? If maybe you already know.
You told me, so go
Did
ahead.
I? Okay, it's $164, $164,000. This is the top end model. It's the first edition, so they don't make all that many of these. This has it's marked by the copper paint, if you will, the bronzed paint. The only thing more expensive as far as this goes is the long wheelbase first edition. This is the P530 with the 4.4 liter twin turbo V8, 523 horsepower, 553 foot-pounds of torque. So yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of sticker shock here as far as just Range Rover pricing. I feel like it's, really snuck up on me as far as, where it was even a few years ago. I mean, I guess that's like bread, milk, everything. But, it's getting up there above just like, hey, we're going to compete with the really top end, like BMWs and Mercedes. It's starting to get in that gap between like, some of the more mainstream, if you will, like German cars and even the Cadillac Escalade, up to like kind of that bridge between things like the Aston Martin DBX, things like that. So it's expensive, let's put it that way, but it's gorgeous. I mean,
yeah, it is really nice looking.
Yeah. Have you driven it by chance? I realize I'm kind of late to the party driving it.
I have not. No, I have not.
Okay. So it was revealed last fall, and the cars were making their way out throughout the course of the year. I definitely like the twin turbo V8. Very powerful. Sounds good.
I love when you attach some sort of forced induction to a V8 and then you double it.
Yes. Yeah, I will say this though. There's a little bit of like a growl, but it's also like, for the most part, it was not like, it wasn't outrageous. Like it wasn't like this like crazy thing. So, in that sense, it was here. Let's do a quick callback here. It was a little bit like the Cadillac, V16 Phaeton, if you will, to try to do a very loose parallel here. It's a luxurious car that's expensive, and you want a powerful engine in it because you're paying a lot of money. So, this is a luxury tactic that they've used throughout the years, throughout the ages. Inside's gorgeous. I would say this, if you have kids, dogs, anybody who's going to ride in the back seat, you probably want to spend the extra $5,000 and go with the long wheelbase model. I can't believe this is the first thing I'm saying as a complaint. It was a little tight back there. My son was like, the screens are right in my face. And I'm like, well, this is not a problem, first of all. But I mean, he also had a point. There wasn't a ton of room in that second row. Perhaps as much as you would expect. But so I would say you might want to go with the long wheelbase version. That being said, the cargo hold was huge. That was great.
Yeah.
We pulled up to Target and they could do the sort of like run and drop sort of thing where you can you roll in, you hit you go through the app and then they bring you out whatever. And it's so quick. You're there for like 3 minutes, because you say you're arriving as you pull in and then you're gone. I could see that the employee was kind of looking at me like, well, okay, not the first time I've seen, maybe a nice SUV, but what is this thing? So in that sense, I think the Range Rover does have that, level of, panache. It has a certain, cachet to it, celebrity kind of look. And I think Range Rover in the last few years, Land Rover has done a good job of making the Range Rover even more prestigious. Like it's not just like, an X5, X6, X7 competitor. It's something different. It's something special,
Mm-hmm.
And they've been doing it through paints and I mean, just interior things, like I said, the second row entertainment was pretty well entertaining, leather, it had a leather headliner.
Wow.
I've never seen that before. I drove an Aston Martin DBX that didn't have one of those. I was just in a Rolls Royce. Now the Rolls Royce had a Starry Night headliner,
right?
Which of course had the constellations as they appeared on the day that production was restarted or launched in Crewe, England. So that's the backstory to that one. Talk about a side note. I've driven some nice cars. I don't think I recalled recently driving something with a leather headliner like this. It was gorgeous.
Yeah,
So,
I can't think if I have. I feel like there's been something in the past 5 years that had that, but I can't remember. I obviously can't remember what it is, so that would make this stand out to me more. And then also it's a car that you're not going to see a ton of. Not a lot of people, at least around here, drive Range Rovers and Land Rovers. So it's always nice if you're spending that amount of money on a vehicle to not be a carbon copy of everything else on the road. The owner of a restaurant I frequent, shout out Banditos. He's a Mercedes guy. He he replaced his GLS with a new GLS. But every time I go in there, he asks me if I've driven this. It's just one of those cars that, because it's not something you see all the time, it does seem maybe a little more special. And the Range Rover name does carry some weight to it, some clout. So yeah, I think that would be a big reason for me why I would, pick this over something else. I would probably pick something else, but one of the reasons I would consider this is just because it's not something you see all the time.
So I was looking for this. The name of the paint is Sunset Gold Satin, which does a really nice job of summing up just how gorgeous this car is, this SUV. Honestly, I will say this, even though I'm driving one of the very the tip of the spear here, to me, if it were my money, I would probably go with the 7-seater, more humble P400 SE with the long wheelbase, the 7-seat. That gets you the mild hybrid. That's the 3-liter turbocharged inline 6, 395 horsepower, 406 pound-feet of torque, $110,500. You could even step down for the short wheelbase, which, like I said, it's a little tight in there. If you're doing anything more than a small family, you probably want to go with the long wheelbase. That one's 104,500. So, I mean, when you're talking about $65,000 in savings, and frankly, I would prefer the hybrid, would be my preference, because this is a great V8, but so it goes, we've all driven great V8s before. It's, I think I definitely go with the other one, the smaller inline six with the hybrid application. So, but again, with this, you're thinking you're cross shopping this thing with, the Galanda wagon, the Escalade V. You're not going to like save fuel economy a gallon here. You're going for, because it's expensive. You're literally buying this SUV because it's more expensive. So, I see why people would go for that. And the first edition is very special. It's very, very cool. I mean, it's definitely helps sort of, position this as something that's special and different. And I'll say this too. I think the vehicle looks great. They've done a good job of sort of cleaning up some of the different elements of Range Rover design over the years. I think it's, more than 50 years now. The brand is around. The nameplate has been around in some form. It's very sleek. It's got like the high sides with kind of the low greenhouse. That's how it looks from the outside. But inside, it's pretty airy, a lot of leg and headroom. It's, excellent view of the road too. It's one of those rare vehicles in this time, if you will, that looks almost chopped. Like it feels like you're high up, and you are, but then the roof is just kind of like, it's designed to look like it's, it's not like a lead sled, or anything like that. Yeah. But they designed it very well. Head and taillights look great, especially the taillights. I mean, the front end looks pretty Land Rover-y, if you will. In the back, they've got these almost like L or C kind of like shapes for the taillights. Looks great. Wheels, very much kind of like almost oversized. I think a lot of that is what I'm getting here on the first edition. But, I really give Land Rover credit that like the design has managed to stay sporty, if you will, for an SUV. I know that's a cliche, but also in sleek, but it still looks like a Land Rover, still looks like a Range Rover. So I think they really succeeded there. And another note of familiarity, the steering is just spot on Land Rover. It's a little bit of work, if you will, to steer it to like really, there's a lot of numb is not the right word because it's pretty communicative, but you got to work. There's a lot of like turn in. And I've noticed that, and maybe you've noticed that in Range Rovers and Land Rovers over the years. But this one had 4-wheel steering as well. So it handled very well. I did a couple of like just things where I had to like make a turnaround, and it's like, oh geez, what are you doing? Or I was in this pizza place and I had to do a very tight, turn in, park, then have to run in, get the pizza, then run out. Like, of course, like there's like tens of people doing the exact same thing. So it was very maneuverable, far more than you expect. This like expensive, huge vehicle, which that's one of my favorite features this year, just to bring this all together, is 4-wheel steering. I had it in the Rolls-Royce Cullinan. Can't believe I'm, making this comparison here, but it makes enormous vehicles that are often expensive so much less intimidating to drive.
Oh, heck yeah. I had the Mercedes EQS recently, and you almost have to like recalibrate your brain to steer differently and to approach your parking angles differently, just because it rotates way more than you expect it to. I mean, once you get used to it, it's great, and it makes backing to a parking place super snappy, especially for something as big as it is. And it also makes it smoother going down the road, makes lane changes smoother. But yeah, I especially like it for that tighter turning circle in crowded parking lots, especially if you're driving something as big as a extended wheelbase Range Rover. Yeah, four-wheel steering's your friend.
All right, so we've talked a lot about money. Should we spend some?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. Sandra writes, I currently drive a 2003 Subaru Forester with over 250,000 miles on it. I am the second owner. The car is old, but in good condition. However, I know my time with this vehicle may be limited. Yeah, maybe. I mean, Subarus do run forever, but that's 19 years old with 250 on the clock. I mean, I think it's a good idea to reach out to us. Let me put it that way. I drive a lot, 3,000 miles a month. with my dogs. So flat, spacious cargo space to have the dog crates and kennels for safety concerns. This is super important to me. We both have dogs. Totally get that. Yep. Given how much I drive and fuel economy is important, all-wheel drive is nice for the occasional wintry weather that they get up there in the Pacific Northwest. I do not have a third passenger in my car very often, so all the seats behind the front driver passenger rows will be folded flat or removed. I currently have 3 dog crates in my Subaru. I would like to have at least that much space to fit my 3 dog crates in the new car. Okay, so here's the field here. I've looked at the RAV4 Hybrid, the Honda CR-V Hybrid, which is sort of comparable to her current setup. I'm looking for a new ride with updated modern safety features. Things like blind spot warning are nice. Briefly considered some used vehicles, but this is the greatest sentence right here. I thought the current used car market is crazy. If I'm paying that much for a used vehicle, I may as well get a brand new one. 100%. It's bonkers right now. I would only just say, if you can find a used car that you like, I mean, I wouldn't be just dissuaded, because right now, average new car price just hit $48,000. You know, it's kind of a crapshoot either way, frankly. You know, you really gotta, I wouldn't dissuade you, I guess, if you will, if you found like a lightly used 20 or 21 that had a good price. A couple other things here. Other class of vehicles, considering as a midsize SUV, Highlander Hybrid, or even going all the way up to a Hyundai Palisade or Kia Telluride. Fuel economy is not so great, but she likes the tech. Hyundai Santa Fe, Kia Sorento Hybrid, also in there, but they're very hard to come by. That is true. That is very true. Again, other things, I'll kind of get through this, wrap this up here. She was looking at minivans, Toyota Sienna, which is all hybrid. You should check out James Riswick's breakdown on that one. He thinks it's the best minivan. It's very competitive. It's very good. They said the wait is more than 2 years, and they're not even taking orders, is what local, I guess, Toyota dealers are telling her. Also likes the Kia Carnival. She doesn't want to pay the dealer markup. Not in a hurry to get a new car. Want to be prepared and plan ahead. I'm putting money away so I can have a sizable down payment with a small loan, if not outright paying cash. Think my timeline is 6 months to a year if the Subaru holds up. What do you think I should do? Phew. Great letter. Thank you for writing, Sandra. I think you accurately sum up what a lot of people are actually going through right now in the new and used car market, trying to navigate their needs versus price versus new versus used versus what they can actually get. And that's frankly the intersection of life, right? How do you balance what you want versus the compromises you need to make to get there? So I will kick it over to you, John, for some thoughts, and we can go back and forth here. This is a little bit to unpack.
Yeah, so before I even started seeing the possibilities that she was looking at, the one that came to my mind was the Highlander Hybrid. You can get it in all-wheel drive, and the all-wheel drive still has fantastic fuel economy. You only lose 1 mpg combined compared to the, not all-wheel drive. So it's, 35 miles per gallon, which is fantastic. And it's a big vehicle. This generation has extended the cargo area in the back. It didn't expand the room for the third row. So the third row is still really tiny. But if you're mostly just going to have it down flat, doesn't matter. You've got the extra cargo space that Toyota put into this thing. If you've been driving a 2003 vehicle with 250,000 miles on it, you probably have some expectations for how long a vehicle's going to last, and your shot of this lasting is probably better than most other brands. And also, you mentioned the Telluride and the Palisade. As a Palisade owner, I still think what you would be looking for would be a Highlander. The fuel economy in the Palisade is not great. That's the one thing I don't like about it. And right now, especially with gas prices, I would be feeling a lot better about driving a Highlander hybrid around. And yeah, again, all-wheel drive, lots of cargo room, probably going to get some serious longevity out of it. And yeah, it's not bad to drive. It's not what I would call slow. It's not particularly quick, and you do have that CVT sort of droning a little bit, but yeah, pretty straightforward vehicle. Lots of cargo room, especially if you're folding those seats down flat. Plenty for dogs and then some. Yeah, so that's what I would go with. The RAV4. I'd have to look at some of James's luggage tests, because in the real world, it's hard to tell what's going to be bigger or smaller with the RAV4 and Honda CR-V. I think those are, in just looking at the cargo area in those feel smaller. The Forester definitely has that nice height to the cargo area, but you're probably not going to be putting stuff on top of your dog crates. But yeah, the RAV4 hybrid and Honda CR-V hybrid, again, maybe, not sure. 3 dogs, depends on how big the dogs are. It might be on the small side. Highlander hybrid, I don't think you're going to have a problem with that. So that's what I would pick.
Good advice. First of all, I would agree with that. I think that's a good move. I think also looking at the CR-V hybrid could be a good move as well. Again, not the biggest thing you can get out there, but I think if you're used to a certain level of quality and reliability, going with like a Honda is, you're not going to be disappointed in the long run on that. I don't think. I mean, historically, they've always stood up really well. I'm going to go off the board here and throw the Toyota Venza kind of out here. That's like, it's a hybrid. It's all-wheel drive. I have not driven it, disclaimer, but it's the return of a nameplate that was, was gone for a few years. And that might be something just interesting to throw onto your consideration list as well, because it does tick a couple of the boxes. You do have some room in there. That could be something that, it's worth like considering and seeing if you even like it. I drove the Santa Fe hybrid a while ago. I'm trying to remember when, and that's pretty good. I think I have one dog. She's a golden retriever, and she didn't ride in her crate. She rode, I think, shotgun actually, but she fit in that thing. She's a big dog though. So, those would be a couple I would consider as well. And then I would also look at the Subaru Forester. I think that's the new one. If you had an 03, you might be interested in at least checking out what the new one looks like, or the Outback. My preference tends to lean Outback when comparing the two. This is like an age-old debate we've had on the podcast and as a staff. But those would be two just that I think would be worth, take a look, see if maybe what, Subaru is doing 20 years after, your current car, was built, and just see if that might work too. Because I do like the current Outback. I think the styling has gotten a little wild, especially that like wilderness trim they have going on. But those would be interesting, just again, things to cross shop as well.
Well, the Forester also has that cool wilderness trim. And one thing about about this generation of Forester, it's gotten bigger on the inside without getting bigger on the outside.
Yes.
So there's that going for you. If you really like the Forester, I think you're going to find maybe a little more comfort and quietness in some of the other picks out there. You mentioned the Santa Fe. That's a great one. And that you can get in a plug-in hybrid too.
That's true. Yeah.
And that's a great car. The Sorento also. But honestly, and my thing about the Outback, I agree that I like the Outback better than the Forester. That's what I would pick. And they do have just about the same cargo room on paper. In reality, the slope of the rear glass on the lift gate back there of the Outback sort of makes, if your crates are tall, you might run into a little something there trying to get that lift gate closed, as opposed to the Forester where it's all basically crate shaped, straight up, and that's a box. So yeah, you could take a look at the Forester. I'm still sticking with Highlander Hybrid.
All right, sounds good. So let us know what you end up doing. I hope this is actually helpful. What we did is what we often do on the podcast is take what you give us to throw a couple more considerations on there too. So please let us know how it turns out. We'd love to offer any more advice, which is what we're going to do next here. This is another update from Blake. This series started back at episode 726. We did touch on it last week. And I actually emailed Blake and said, hey, I'm just curious, what do you mean by this? And then he came back with a couple other, more like contextual elements. So just a quick refresher. Originally, 726, Blake was between getting a Blackwing or a 911. What he's since done is actually go out and buy an '08 Turbo. And then he put an order in on a new 911, but there's a major wait time right now. So what he's trying to figure out is, decide at the time, does he want to actually go ahead with that new 911 when it comes in? I think he said it was like a wait time of like 2 years. Like, it's almost blowing my mind how long it takes people to get things that like,
crazy.
I mean, 911s are hard to get, but they're not like a couple years ago, they weren't that hard to get. And like, Sandra was talking about how hard it is just to get like Hyundais and Kias. Like, what kind of world are we living in where you can't go get a Kia? Like, it's crazy times. But so anyways, Blake is just curious if, the way he put it is, at the moment, I just don't know. The new car will be objectively better. This is a new 911. But he's like, hey, he went ahead and bought a 997. It's got that old school look, hydraulic steering. It's the last generation of the manual turbos. So when the time comes, future Blake and present day Greg and John will try to suggest, should he trade in the '08 Turbo or just go ahead and, cancel the order and roll with that? So, man, I don't know. It's one of those things where I would almost say you're in a situation where it's a little bit like two different things. If I got a new 911, I would treat that as my daily driver. I think the '08 Turbo is going to, at some point in the next few years, transition into something that it's not quite old enough to be vintage. It's definitely a respectable daily driver from that standpoint. But I feel like it might turn into something that you might decide you don't want to give up. So, I mean, I don't know, financially, if you're like, you can do both. But my instinct is, unless something goes wrong or you really get turned off by the Turbo, you might just want to keep that 997, and if that means, okay, maybe I don't want to actually go ahead with the new 911. I want to say, hey, I spent some money on this toy car and I need to get something a little more practical. Maybe that ends up being your play. Not practical, but like, something that, makes it a little more palatable to keep this '08 Turbo, but also have like a sporty car, like maybe just I don't know, you make do with like a non like V Series Blackwing Cadillac. You just go with like one below that or something. So I don't know. What would you do, John?
I would keep the '08. 100%.
Okay.
I really feel like that giving up that car, it would be, even as much as you might like the brand new 992, I'm sorry, you're gonna really enjoy the '08. I mean, you said it right there. It's the last generation of the manual turbo.
Yeah, I can't argue.
I regret. I had a Subaru WRX, and it was great, and the manual turbo, and I got rid of it. I regret it deeply. And in a Porsche, I mean, it's just such a fantastic car. That generation of 911 Turbo, I just really, really, really love it. And if it were mine, if I had that in my garage, I don't think there's any new car that could get me to sell that. I just know from past experiences with cars that I've gotten rid of, the amount of regret that I would feel getting rid of that car. So yeah, that's what I would do. I would just keep that. Go, find a way to take a ride or a drive in the new 911. I honestly don't get the same emotional feeling from driving it as I do with previous generations. It's just not as soulful to me. Maybe I haven't spent enough time with it. But gosh, yeah, I just know the heartbreak that I would feel getting rid of the one you've got now.
So 100%. I think you kind of like in some ways put an even finer point on my own thoughts. I just went back and looked at the original question, and Blake wrote that this is a third car, so it is purely for fun. So I would do exactly what you said. Go test drive the new 911. And if you just like do totally fall in love with it and you're like that's where your brain's at, like, hey, I've always wanted the new one. I want the newest and the best and the power, and you want it because it's new and expensive, then maybe that is what you want. But if it's just for fun, if it were me, I suspect that the 08 is going to like grow with time. It's really going to like, you're not going to be you're going to be one of the only people who has that car. It's, to use the example from my own life, I was able to just get an old Seiko Monster dive watch. I got a good price on it. A friend actually did a little work on it. And, I was talking to some other watch friends and they were like, oh man, like they had like the latest like Seiko releases, which were, crazy expensive and crazy, like, capable as far as diving to like the Lusitania or something. But they were all like, oh gosh, man, I wish we had this thing, even though it was a fraction of the cost. And I realized this is a little like bit of a tangent, but I mean, that's how I would frame it in my own life is I feel like with time that, the vintage, if you will, Porsche is going to grow. So yeah, I mean, drive the new one and see how it feels. And I think you'll know after that drive, it'll be pretty clear in your head, like what you want to do. But I mean, I suspect you're going to land on the 997.
My life advice to everyone out there
it's getting deep here,
who has wants to have a car that they're going to keep around for a while, go buy any car with a manual. Go buy all the cars with a manual transmission and a turbocharger. Buy them all. Buy doubles and triples of them. Keep them. Hold on to them because they're fantastic. And that is the format that I'm going to miss when EVs are have proliferated and internal combustion go away. Manual turbo. Just save them all.
I will not say anything else. That's perfect. That's the best way to end it. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a 5-star rating at Apple Podcasts. Send us your Spend My Money. That's podcast@autoblog.com. Blake, Sandra, please let us know what you end up doing. Everybody be safe out there, and we'll see you next week.